I like what you said about how, like, you said the players are the ones who run the sport. And it's true because, a lot of the people who watch it are players themselves.
Sure,
you know what I mean? It's a very niche sport where, unlike basketball or football, like I watch basketball and I watch football too. I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a football player.
Sure.
But I'll still watch the sport. Whereas paintball is a little different, where most of the people who are watching it, the people you see like in the stands for events, those are players too. Those are most likely players who are also playing the event.
Sure.
And in their off time, where they don't have a game, or their day is done, or they got knocked out of the tournament, they'll go watch the pro guys because who doesn't want to watch the pro players play. It's definitely run by or at least the players themselves are a big part of the viewership in paintball. Which is unfortunate, because, and like I said, I just think it goes back to that whole thing of it's hard to keep track. If you're not someone who's really seen it before or watched it before or even played it yourself, it's hard for you to follow along.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Beanie After Dark edition. Cheers, Chan. They say it in Korea. We are sipping today with my boy, Nick Gayoso.
Yes, sir.
And today we're going to be talking about nothing but sports and sports only. We're going to be talking about paintballing. We're going to talk about a lot about the World Cup soccer that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're going to be chopping shop, maybe jump into football a little bit because I know that's a big thing right now too. So yeah, very excited to sit down with you. Yeah, we actually got a cool little thing going on. If you want to show the squad, yeah. This is pretty dope. I was like, yo, look at this. This is no joke.
So this is my actual paintball gun that I use for tournaments, practice. I mean, this is it. This is my go-to right here.
So so that's only one trigger, right? Like, is it?
It's a double trigger.
That looks nuts.
Yeah.
Look mad dangerous right there.
I mean, this thing it's a blast to shoot, man. So it's a DLX Technologies. It's a Lux TM40. So Lux is kind of the model. TM40 is kind of like the sub-model, essentially. So.
Okay, so this is all right. So for those who don't know, this is the paintballing is known as an NXL, right? Because I think NPL is the National Ping Pong League, right? I don't know if that's the truth or not, but
I have no idea. So NXL is like it's like the NFL of paintball.
Sure,
it's like the biggest league in the U.S. for paintball, and it's where the pro division is at.
And that's where Worlds just happened for. This crazy is back to back for you. This must be a great time to be.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah,
you go from obviously for those who don't know, Nick is really big into soccer, and you can check out his life story in the description. We've sat down with him, and it's really, really interesting for those who want to dive into that. So that's really, really fun. So anyway, more of the story. So one of the things I really wanted to chat shop with you about is the kind of that whole starting off with a kind of ping pong. Sorry, well, Jesus. See now, I think it's already started. It's already getting to me. Obviously the paintballing and that whole aspect of things, because that thing was fascinating watching that entire show. They're taking this mad seriously.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at it, I was thinking like, man, this is tiring. Like it's just nonstop. There's no real I mean, it's even in football, I guess soccer kind of feels the same. It's just always kind of running. Yeah. But you have like a big squad of people that's subbing in and out. But you don't have like that big of a team. When I was looking at the bench, most people were sitting around like 8 maybe.
Yeah, so most teams are going to carry around like 8 to 10 guys.
Sure.
Pro teams are probably going to carry higher towards that 10, 11. Just because their matches are a little bit longer. Pros play 15-minute matches. Whereas the lower divisions, depending on where you are, is like if you're Division 5, which is the lowest, you start at 8 minutes. And then it kind of moves up from there a little by little until you get to the pro.
So I have a question here. So watching paintballing, right? Watching that actual aspect of things and that whole game of the back and forth, the interactions with the teams. One of the things I really noticed is that it seems like the biggest region is California. I saw Sacramento, LA. I'm saying like a lot of like obviously familiar cities around California, but in a world kind of space. But I also saw some other teams as well, but I didn't know what region they came from. They just kind of have different names.
So Cali for sure has. It's definitely outside of just pro teams. Cali is definitely a hot spot for paintball. I mean, we have like just down here in SoCal, we have 4 different, fields that people can go play at. NorCal definitely has a couple fields, with the CEPP, Capital Edge Paintball in Sacramento being the biggest one that they have up north.
Right.
But
that's Sacramento Thunder, right?
No, Sacramento DMG.
DMG.
Yeah.
And DMG was like, they're dangerous too. I was looking at them, and they're actually
they put on a pretty good tournament.
Right.
It unfortunately wasn't good enough to save them. They actually finished last in the rankings.
Yeah, I heard.
Actually,
and it was
relegated.
Running the things I was noticing, because they were promised, like when you were watching kind of the highlights they were going over, like kind of pre-entering the show, like they were looking to be like really, really good, but they didn't get to really see the full stride of them kind of play out during the league. I think a lot of the one-on-ones they lost, and it's really that was really interesting as well.
Yeah,
seeing them go one-on-one, that was actually that's fascinating.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean that's kind of what paintball really comes down to, is like, even though it is 5-on-5, you're basically just playing a bunch of one-on-ones, because you can only shoot at one person.
Sure, right.
So you're practically just playing a bunch of one-on-ones against 5 different people at like, and you're kind of just switching back and forth between whoever you're shooting at any given moment.
So you start off, obviously, for those who don't know. Right, you start off the game, right? You have 5 players, and this is in the league, right? This is not like every match, but you have 5 players. They have to keep their muzzles against like this starting bin, right? But once you hear the sound, it is on.
Yeah.
Like you turn, and I'm surprised they don't shoot each other, because they're swinging. So you swing, and you're already like you're shooting. And some of the crazy things I was watching on day 2, like you would see the smoke like coming from their muzzles.
Oh,
like,
yeah. It's because it's cold.
It's cold, yeah. So I was like, no, that's really dope too. So it was like, it was pretty cool, because you just see them just sizzling, right? But they're like, you're crawling, like you're trying to make moves on the 50-50, right? Everyone's trying to race to the 50-50, because that's the center is where you get really the gain. And there's a strat to be involved. There's rushing strats. You have like, fall behind, or like you have 5 people just shooting down the lane, just trying to
it's definitely crazy. It's chaos off the break, but it's organized chaos. These aren't, I feel like a lot of people, when they think of paintball, they think, like I said before, just dudes running around in a field shooting at each other. But when you kind of get into this organized sport of tournament paintball,
sure,
it's chaos, but like I said, it's organized. There is when you hear that horn, there is a strategy. Everyone has their job to do off the break, when whether it's running and gunning, shooting, or if they just if they're just head down trying to run to a bunker without getting shot.
See, one of the things though that other sports have that I didn't notice that that, how do I say this? Paintballing did is positions. It felt like they all played. There was there was no like, hey, you're a flanker, you're like a, you're just like, everyone is doing everything. There is no like really roles you have, or maybe I'm mistaken here. That's something else.
I mean, there's definitely roles. You do have players. Like you have like the snake side and the Dorito side. You do have players who are like, I guess that's like their specialty, right? Like playing on the snake side, playing on the Dorito side. And there's players who excel at it. If you look at, like, if you think of like Edmonton Impact, they have Alex Goldman. He's considered, at least right now, probably one of the top snake players. In general, one of the top paintball players, but for sure one of the top snake players. And then if you look at Dynasty, who actually won World Cup, they have right now. I don't think I think he's underrated. Dalton Vanderbilt. He actually won the Top Gun award for the tournament for the most kills in the event.
Right.
And he's typically a Dorito-sided player. But and once you're at that level, everybody needs to be able to play everywhere. Whether you're like going snake, Dorito, if you're one of the guys who has to go, especially with this layout with that big wall in the center.
Right.
If you're the guy going up there who has to play the center, if you're more of we call it a 3, which is essentially you're the one who kind of stays back and essentially quarterbacks the team, or you can kind of see the whole field. So everyone has those, like, it's kind of like your specialty or kind of what you're strong at.
Right.
But everyone at that level, and even at our level, you need to be able to play everywhere, because like I mentioned before, the layout of the field isn't always the same. It always changes, from tournament to tournament. So you need to be able to adapt. Like for this layout specifically, the World Cup, the snake side wasn't really strong. It wasn't a layout where you needed to get into the snake. Mostly because the gaps to get in were really big. So it was difficult to get into the snake in general. So it wasn't a layout that was very snake dominant. That it was definitely a center dominant layout. So that's why you saw not a lot of teams were going into the snake, or at all even.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I also noticed is that the players that you're the players that are playing the game, right? You're obviously you have these paintballers, and what they're doing is you come off the muzzle, right? And since you shoot, you're not shooting like one of the thing I noticed is that you're not just shooting to hit. I know that doesn't make sense. You're shooting to stop people from running a certain way.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it is that like you're just trying to control a zone. I guess that's what they call it.
Right? Exactly. Right? That's what it is.
So you control a zone, keeping someone from being able to go that side, and then it allows your team to kind of like. It's really interesting the way you're trying to distract people, and then sometimes you just see everyone just stop shooting and people just start scrambling, trying to find a new place to go.
Yeah.
And then now no one knows where people are at. And one of the things was really hard to find out, which is I was curious about being a player and how that would work, is that you don't know who's in or who's out. Like you really just, it's hard to count because so many, like you're shooting. How many bullets? How many paintballs a minute? A second?
So we ramp. It's called ramping. The legal limit is 10.5 balls per second.
That's just like shooting. And one hits you, right?
Yeah.
Like they're flying. So you just don't really that means you're going through. I'm seeing them try, and that's really the key here. It's like you play on the reload, right? You're playing, waiting for them to stop, because I think you can hear it hitting your.
Yeah, I mean it's a multitude of things. You know, you're always, especially if you're an attacker, you're always looking for that gap. You know, whether it's like you said, they stop shooting at you, and it all comes down. It's teamwork, right?
Sure.
Because a lot of times, like what you said, like you're waiting for that gap or you're waiting for the reload. A lot of times there'll be moments where you need to be the one to make that push, but someone's controlling that zone on you. So that's where that team aspect of the communication comes into play, to where a lot of times you need to tell your guy, like if someone's behind you, be like, hey, this guy's keeping me in, I need you to shoot at him. So that way once he shoots at that guy, he puts him in, so he stops shooting that zone at you. Now you can make the bump. And sometimes you just got to do it yourself. There's you have to fight your way up the field by shooting back at him to tuck him in, and then you can go yourself.
And the premise of the game, right? You're obviously your goal is to eliminate the players, but that's really not the point. And what some of the games I notice is that sometimes you're just trying to like not only, it's really hard on the world level to sneak up there, but like you're just I've seen it just, and people will make it to the other side and not get hit. Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I'm like, wait, like how is this happening? But they'll run over, shoot everyone just to and then someone run behind them. And it would take all the bullets, and you just like, and it's really tactical, like the way the game is developed and how you can see the progression, and it's really looks like a lot of potential. Just watching the way this game is done, it's really really cool. And I'm kind of fascinated to why like it hasn't got. And I was looking at some of the comments of some of the actual world, and a lot of people were kind of, like they said, the biggest disappointment is that like you can't really, it's hard to see what's happening because you don't really get to see. But the good news is that who gets hit because you can see the paint on them, right? Like so. Yeah. But even then, it's gone, like boom. And even and it's funny in the top, they'll have like these 5 men up there.
Yeah.
And they don't even know. Like they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing where with like it's even for the commentators themselves, it's hard to keep control sometimes. Everything going on, you don't, because it's like I said, you don't have a focal point. You don't have like a ball to watch or one ball to watch.
Sure, yeah.
You have 5 guys shooting an enormous amount of paintballs at each other, so you're just trying to like go back and forth, keep track. And I mean, if you really even pay attention, there's plenty of times where the commentators, they'll be like, oh, it's a 4-on-3, and then they'll be like, wait, no, it's not, it's a 4-on-2, or wait, this guy just got shot out like 5 minutes ago and we just barely realized it. Because there's so much going on. It's
so cool though. And do you think one of the things I wanted to ask you, right, is that being the way I've noticed the way it works is that you start off with like 15 or 10 minutes, and it just slowly gets down. Every time you tap the buzzer, you would essentially stop the time, and then you continue, right? And the goal is to have more buzzers than the other.
Yeah, to score more points than the other team before
the time runs out. Yep. And one of the things I noticed is that if I don't know why they started doing one-on-ones, which I didn't understand. Mm-hmm. Why did that come into play? Was it because they hit overtime? Is that like the?
So typically when it comes to like one-on-ones, if it's just a normal 5-on-5, and sometimes there's sometimes you eliminate each other until you only have one left. That's just part of the game. It's not like
But I saw them start off.
Oh yeah. So once you play overtime, you have so in pro you have your 15-minute regulation. If at the end of the 15 minutes you're still tied, you go to a 5-minute overtime. If you end that 5-minute overtime and nobody scored a point, then you go to one-on-ones. And at that point, it's a one-on-one. Whoever wins the one-on-one wins. But it's also timed. I think it's 5 minutes as well. If within those 5 minutes nobody gets hit, then they just another two come on.
I'm not gonna lie. Watching the and this is my question for you. Watching the one-on-one was so much not only easier to watch, but it was actually more interesting, right? Because one of the things I felt like, that there's one person out there, they know there's one person out there, and there's a strat. I've seen some dude just literally get punched like he was on the Dorito, right, very in the far back, and this dude rushed the 50-50, right, but kept him on the Dorito, like he would not. And I mean, he was in broad, right, but anytime he tried to, he just like would ramp up, right. And one of the things I felt like I saw people was able to do, which I think is like, I don't know how, is that he's still shooting and then he grabs. And then he reloads and still shooting. Yeah. And then like, how do you like? It's so you. There's no way to you just seeing it just getting like, is this dude ever gonna reload? But no, people are able to do it.
Yeah, you have to reload while you're shooting.
That is wild.
That especially comes into play when, I mean, even just outside of one-on-ones when it's a regular 5-on-5, and you're controlling a zone. The moment you, especially at that level, the moment you drop that stream of paint, you give them a gap, they're gonna go for it. That's reloading. Shooting and like reloading at the same time is a huge. It's crazy because it's such a small detail.
Right.
It's if once you really do it, and like if you actually just do it yourself, like whenever you like if you ever do it your first time going paintball and you reload, it's really not that hard.
No.
All you're doing is pulling a pot out, and just dumping it into your loader, and you just keep shooting. But it's such a huge part of the game because you got to keep that zone at all times.
So what do you think? Do you think that the game would thrive more if they did more one-on-ones, or do you? Because again, you can follow what's going on the game, and actually, if you give them more time, like I think you get more like 5 people rushing at each other. I mean, that's obviously fascinating. Yeah. But like 2-on-2, 1v1s, like what do you think about that form of dynamic? Because that as a first time watcher, like the one, and that's why I know I keep bringing it up, because the one-on-ones, even though it was just like an overtime small bit of big Pete, that was really interesting seeing them. And you can circle each other like obviously you can't because you got to touch each other's buzzers in some way. So you're trying to defend the flag in a way. Yeah. But like that was something that I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to like the one, like the one-on-ones, it's like I said, it's you have more of a focal point because now instead of keeping track of 10 people, you have to keep track of just 2 people.
Sure.
So it makes it so much easier to follow. And it makes it easier to follow what's going on, instead of keeping track of, oh, this guy went here, this guy went there. It's like, oh, he just went here, he went here. So it's just make it easier to follow. But in terms of like if the sport would grow better if it went down to like that, probably not. Really? Realistically.
Okay.
And a lot of it has to do with money.
Sure.
Because if you have
paying 5 players versus 1. I think it would be easier to actually because then it'd be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but like I said, a lot of it just comes down to money. I mean, and 5-on-5 is the newest format, right? When it started back in the day, early 2000s, we were doing 10-on-10s.
Right.
Then it went to 7-on-7, and now we have the current, iteration of 5-on-5. It's just, a lot of it has to do. I think it's the best format, 5-on-5. It's just how the game works.
Okay.
Because if you go into like one-on-one and stuff like that, it's supposed to be a team sport. If you take it into one-on-ones, it's kind of just like, what's the point of having a team?
Well, like okay.
Now you're just playing. You might as well just play for yourself.
Okay, so one thing about basketball that makes basketball really special, right, is because you have positions and roles in your positions, right? Yeah. Shaq is supposed to do one thing, he's point guard, right? That you got, like each player is doing something specific that makes them great at that specific craft. And for the game, it feels like you're not playing a position, you're playing I don't want to say a barrier, but like that's the best way I can explain it in my mind. Mm. And one of the things I felt was like if you were able to go and do like a 2v2, right? And I know it sounds, I know but my question for you, right, is as you see over time that it keeps getting smaller and smaller. I wonder what the reason is. Do you know why that happens? Because one of the things I noticed is that I'm curious on why they made those decisions, but one of the things I think it is because is not only the viewer side of things, but it's also really hard to compensate 10 players, right? It's much easier to compensate. Well, you're still, 20, because you have to have 10 other people on the bench or 15 or whatever, but now it's at least at 10. And making it just one person, you have like some of the most interesting ping pong. You can have 2 players. Even beach volleyball is a good example of like you can have 6 people, but then you could break it down to 2, and that's made like one of the best Olympic sports ever.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious on like your perspective. Why has it gone down? Right? Why has it gone down? And being a player, what is the difference? I don't know if you ever played 1-on-1s or 2-on-2s or 5v5s. Like, what do you think is like the appeal as a player to a 5v5, or is it even fun as a 10v10? Can you give me more of an understanding of like?
They're all fun. Like like we said, like 10v10. Like we had practice this past weekend, and we played a 10v10 on the field, and it's a blast playing. And I played 10 man at World Cup too, and it's awesome. It's so fun because the field is like double the size of what the normal field of 5v5 is. So it's so difficult. Like they have like 1-on-1 tournaments, like small local ones. They do like 2-on-2s. 3v3s is actually something that's they have at all events. They have like a 3-man tournaments, and they had them at World Cup too. So there is, they do have those smaller tournaments, where it's like, 3v3, 2v2s instead of just the normal 5-on-5s. And actually right now, 10-man is actually making a big comeback right now. So a lot of events or a lot of like leagues and stuff like that are holding 10-man events again, rather than just the normal 5v5. Like the local one here, the WCPPL, we have a 10-man tournament in 2 weeks, December 3rd and 4th. And this is the second annual one that they've done. So they had one last year, and they're having one this year. So there's definitely the market for playing 10-man is still there. And it's like I said, right now it's making a big comeback because a lot of these teams a lot of these leagues are starting to get back into it because they realize that people still want to play it. And it's a good way to bring old school ballers back into it. Older guys who haven't played or maybe aren't a fan of the current iteration of paintball right now. So they, having these 10-man events kind of just lets them kind of relive that, what they had back in the day when they were playing.
And what do you think, again, it feels like with this sport specifically, right, this podcast, if you don't know, this is the Unhinged, right? I'm really trying to get a better understanding, right, of like you have, it feels like the players run the sport. It's not like the audience or like the viewers are the ones who, because that's how it feels like every other sport is ran, right?
Yeah.
You have the viewers who dictate what they want to watch, and by what they want to watch is what the people will essentially do. The players just want to play in any way, shape, or form. You just want to shoot each other. But obviously, there's formats that you like. You want war, right? That's the whole kind of aspect it feels like with paintballing.
Yeah.
The being like 10 guys and see like your brothers are, charging in. And, I can imagine like the feeling of like seeing that aspect happening. I imagine with 10 people is more invigorating.
Yeah.
But I definitely can tell, like, as a viewer, one of the hardest things was just kind of like watching this each game and just kind of seeing it progress and just recognizing that, man, it's really hard to get. It's like, I think you are a little bit different because you watched it for a while, but it's really hard to kind of really build a relationship with a player, right? To kind of really kind of like man, I really enjoy the dynasty players. Like I wish I knew one of their names. Like, just honestly, like, man, really get to adapt and be able to feel like, oh, okay, I know about this player. I know about like what this person does, and what makes them special. And I feel like you gain that when you have kind of like those, not only just those smaller teams, but when your team, I guess when this league is really trying to promote individual key players, like, so I don't know what's your thoughts on that, but definitely I could see it as a player how exciting that could be.
Yeah, I mean, I like to go. I like what you said about how, like, you said the players are the ones who run the sport.
Sure,
and it's true because a lot of the people who watch it are players themselves.
Sure.
What I mean? It's not. it's a very niche sport where, unlike basketball or football, like I watch basketball and I watch football too. I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a football player.
Sure.
But I'll still watch the sport. Whereas paintball is a little different, where most of the people who are watching it, the people you see like in the stands for events, those are players too. Those are most likely players who are also playing the event.
Sure.
And in their off time, where they don't have a game, or their day is done, or they got knocked out of the tournament, they'll go watch the pro guys, because who doesn't want to watch the pro players play. So yeah, it's definitely run by, or at least the players themselves are a big part of the viewership in paintball. Which is unfortunate, because and like I said, I just think it goes back to that whole thing of it's hard to keep track if you're not someone who's really seen it before or watched it before or even played it yourself. It's hard for you to follow along.
But I think you want to feel like you can. That's one thing I recognize. Like me watching, I wanted to feel like, man, I can get it.
Yeah. But
another big thing was I also kind of had to take in the fact that, like, if I did really understand the intricacies of it all,
yeah,
I was still pretty excited watching it. Like it's really fun to watch. Like it's not like one of those sports that is, and again, no shade to the World Cup soccer going on. We're about to get into that. But it's not one of those sports where it takes forever to really that kind of, just like, oh yeah, okay. Oh no, it's like off the rip. There's things going on. You're glued to the screen trying to see what happens, but But then by the end of it, you're like, wait, what just happened? Like you don't really have that. You don't get satisfied in the same way. Where soccer, I think, does it really well because it's the same kind of relationship. There's a lot of players on the field.
Yeah.
It's a big field, but it's open, right? So you can see everyone in the dynamics of things. You know where the ball's at, so you know where to focus on. Like you said, there's the focal point. But one of the things I think would be really, really cool is if they had not only cams on the guns, which I know you said that they were trying to introduce with this time.
Yeah.
Because you even saw cameramans getting shot, which was really funny. Like the cameras were getting shot, and they're like, "Oh shoot!" They scam over to other people. But you have the referees. You have to have like 8 referees up in there, right? Like there's a few of them.
I think there's.
I'm tripping.
12 of them.
Oh snap!
Yeah, no,
I even got that wrong.
Yeah.
But like you're there's a lot of checks and balances, right? Like you have a guy who's gonna run like on Snake, crawling through Snake, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to go and hit someone on like on a triangle or like what they call a rectangle or whatever.
Doritos.
So Doritos, and then what like a rectangle, is that right?
Yeah, we call them the bricks.
The brick. Okay.
Yeah.
And so he pivots, and they both look at each other and they shoot.
Yeah.
And then they're both screaming because they're like, I shot him first, he shot, like, and then you're just, the referees, like, all 8 of them, there's like, I don't know, like, the bullets are so quick.
Yeah, being a ref is super hard, and especially in the pro league, because these dudes are, they're, aside from being really good paintball players, they're also really good cheaters, and paintball, as much of it, it's an honor sport, right? It's you get shot, call your, the whole, you got to call yourself out. But I'd be lying if I'd say we don't cheat.
It's a World Cup.
Yeah, well, I mean that's just whether it's World Cup or just any other event in general, people
don't want to lose.
Yeah, people don't want to lose. Players wipe hits. They try to hide hits, or they try to get away with stuff. And like I said, being a referee, it's super hard. Because you have to make those decisions of when 2 guys shoot at each other. It's like, who shot who first,
right?
And sometimes it's so close to where if you're a ref, you have to make that decision. You're like fuck, but good referees at that level, it's the decision is still hard to make, but they're you being there up close, there's, you definitely know when it's at the same time, or if it was like, okay, he shot him first, but yeah, players definitely cheat. They ride on that line of wiping hits, because if you get caught wiping a hit, that's a big, you'll fuck your team big time on a point, because you have minors and majors. A minor is just a 1-for-1, so they'll pull you for the penalty, and then they'll pull one of your teammates. A major is a 2-for-1, so they'll pull you plus 2 guys. If you get caught like wiping specifically, that's a gross major, so they're pulling 4 guys on that, and you have 5 players at any given moment. So if you get caught wiping, you get a gross major, you just wiped out your whole team minus 1 guy.
So is that like just for the round?
Yeah, just for that one point.
For that one point.
Yeah, for that one point.
So
But I mean, it can carry on into other points. So like, if it's if you get a major and you're the last guy alive, that carries. It's because they don't have any more bodies to pull. The way they'll assess the penalty, one is they'll give the other team the automatic point.
So okay, I'm gonna let you continue here, but my question was, and for just those who were watching that didn't get to see the show, didn't get to see the World Cup. One of the things I noticed is that they're really only checking the person who touches the buzzer, right? Is that kind of accurate, or are they always checking whoever walks off the field?
No, I mean throughout the game, as the game's being played, you have the referees, watching the players to, make sure. I mean, my buddy, one of my ref buddies, like to say this a lot. I'll tell him, like, the referees are there to enforce the rules, but he always tells me, he's like, no, the referees are there to enforce safety, the safety of the players. But they will enforce, the rules if they catch a player, playing on with a hit, wiping, doing whatever. But yeah, so when it comes to like touching the buzzer specifically, they check that one player himself.
Because I saw it every single round. Like, you always check the person. He turns around, he makes sure that he has nothing on him.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the others, right? Because I never got to see the other referees check some of the other players who still was there.
Yeah.
As they got off, because I imagine you just check your gloves if it'll still be on there. Or I don't know how wiping works, but I mean some people must be really good at it. So
yeah, I mean there's different ways. There's so many when it comes down to wiping. It's
like, okay, look, I don't want to say it, but like
you. I mean, when you're not being a wiper. Wiping a hit is nothing to be proud of. But it's definitely something that everyone's done. I 100% have done it. I've never gotten caught doing it. I remember one time I got shot straight in the hand. I was literally just holding a zone shooting, and the dude just hit me straight in the hand. I immediately came into my bunker, and I just put my hand against the bunker, and I acted like if I was like talking to my teammates, like calling out like where the other guys were, and I just started rubbing my hand on the bunker until it went away. So I mean, there's creative ways to wipe. Whether it's like if you get shot in the leg while you're running, you can slide it off. Or you can, like I said, you can like rub it off on a bunker, or sometimes you'll just literally just do it with your hand. But as far as, like I said, going like with touching the buzzer, yeah, they're only checking that guy because he's the actual one who touched the buzzer.
So they want to just make sure at least one person.
Yeah, he has to be clean because he's the one who touched the buzzer. If they find a hit on him, then it's a dirty hang, and it's either a no point or it's a point for the other team.
Ooh.
Yeah, but there are instances you can be called out for a hit while they're checking him. Like if you're still like I said, if you're playing on and the ref sees a hit on you, you're eliminated. And if you're still playing on, you're gonna get eliminated and you're gonna get a minor for it.